We were talking about the first thing that this session is for introduction on data privacy. The primary requirement what we have is the data security. On that one, we are going to have a specific requirement. That's what we are going to call as a data privacy. These are the thing that we had as a part of the agenda. We have as part of the agenda. We are going to see the meaning of data and information and the difference between them. Then what is the meaning of information security? Then how do we say that it is going to be a data privacy? What is the definition for data privacy? And what is the future that is there, where we are ahead, where we are moving towards in terms of data privacy? And then we'll also be spending some time today on these four systems that are there, these four standards: GDPR, which is Europe-based standard for General Data Protection Act. So then the CCPA is a California-based one. This is again, it is related to same area, but it is specific to California Consumer Privacy Act. Then CPPA is related to Canadian Consumer Privacy Protection Act, and PDPB is going to be India-based one. So these are the four areas that we'll be spending today. So we will also be having something on career opportunities also here. We will not be much focusing on that, but I'll just give some pointers so that you can focus on that one. So first of all, what is the meaning of data? Data is something. This is the difference between data and information, what you have seen yesterday. So data is going to be always the raw data that we have. So most of the time, it is going to be the information that is in the time when you're going to collect it, and it is going to be collection of facts. Most of the time, it is going to be variables, which is qualitative or quantitative. Mostly, they are unrelated one. They are going to be individual things that are there, and you are going to collect that. And when you read that, when you look at that, they may not have any sense at all. It is going to be meaningless in some cases if you are just looking at the raw data. It can be of any media type. It can be a graph, it can be a number, text, figure, or statistics, whatever it is. And it is not going to help us in decide unless you are going to set a context for that. So that is what is information. You are going to use this raw data, and then you are going to set a context for that, and then we are going to analyze that. So by analyzing it, by processing it, you are trying to convert data into an information. And when you are doing that, the data that you have is going to be organized in a specific way so that they are going to get related to each other, so that you will get a meaningful information from that one. And the facts that we get from the data are going to be set with the context so that we can make a decision based on that. The structure that you are going to have, the way that we are going to structure the data, that is also going to give a different meaning. And then we are going to get a big picture, because when you are looking at the individual data, it's going to give pieces, bits and pieces, but you are going to collect that and collate that information, then you are going to a big picture, and based on that, you can take a decisions. And this is going to be more meaningful, and this is going to be more textual one, because you are going to present by in terms of language, thoughts, and ideas. And based on that, we will be in a position to take decisions also. That's a major difference between data and information. In some of the places where, even in this presentation also, we will be using data and information with the same meaning. But actually, you need to understand that data is the one which is raw, and information is the one which is processed based on the data that we have achieved. Now, once we have this information collected, then from there, we are going to build our knowledge. So you're going to get multiple information from multiple sources. Then we are going to build that knowledge. That knowledge is going to be available for future, so that's what is going to be helpful to take our skill to the next level. That is what we are going for this one. So in this one, there are going to be multiple activities. So we're going to collect the information systematically. We are going to create, share, and apply. These are the activities that we do with the information. When we do that, if you keep adding this information again and again on the same context, what you are going to get, or what you are going to build, is a knowledge, and that knowledge is going to be useful for us in future. Because if we want to know anything, if you want to analyze anything, this knowledge is going to be always useful. So knowledge management is one of the major activities that most of the companies will be doing, because today's world, if you have information, that is, the information is the key, only key. And if you want to maintain the information in the right way, you need to have a knowledge management system. So to do this, what are the phases that are there? So acquiring knowledge, creating knowledge. So these are the two ways by which you are going to get the knowledge. One thing is you are going to, somebody is going to share, and then you are going to get some knowledge. Like we are attending this training today, and because of the training, we are getting some directions on certain new areas which we are not familiar earlier. So that is how we are acquiring knowledge, and we are not going to stop there. So what we are going to do is we are going to think on that. We are going to put some logic over that, or we will be doing ourselves to understand. And by way of understanding that, you will be creating a new knowledge also. That's the second thing where we are going to come out with new things. And then the knowledge is going to be shared. So when you only when you share, it is going to increase. It is like a fire, right? It's like a fire. Unless you are going to give, it is not going to. And the more you give, the more it is going to spread. So sharing is always good as far as knowledge is concerned. The more share, the better you know about that subject. Because even the people who are already in the teaching line, they should know about that. More and more you start teaching on a subject, you will get clarity on that one. That is the power of knowledge. And learning is one of the things, because ultimately the knowledge what we are going to save, what we are going to preserve is going to be used in future, so that we can learn from that. We can learn from the failures as well as the success from that one. So failure, we know that we should not do in future. Success, we can reuse that and then start getting that one. So protecting knowledge is also one thing where you are going to choose it, and so that it is going to be helpful later. So that is why we have this knowledge management as part of that. So what we have is, this is a transformation, what we are trying to do. From data, we are going to get into information, from information to knowledge, knowledge to opportunities. Why do you want to have a knowledge? Because these are the skills that you are going to get. Once the knowledge is going to increase, that's going to be a skill for us, new skill. And based on the skill, we are going to look for opportunities for improvement. So opportunities are going to be the final output that we are going to get when you are starting with the raw data. And that's what we have here. For each of this, when you want to convert into this one, there are certain activities which you do. Out of that, you are going to get data. For information, you will be doing extracting, data cleaning, formatting, categorizing, so that you are trying to group it so that you will get some information which is going to be more meaningful than the data what you have in the previous phase. Like this, you are going to apply some activity, and then you are transforming rather, that from data to information, information to knowledge, and knowledge into opportunity. That is what ultimately we are looking for. Now, when we talk about information, you said that we are going to have a knowledge management. How are we going to have a knowledge management? So for that, you need to have a system. That is what is the information management system. So when you see system is going to be combination of people, process, and infrastructure. So when you have people, process, and infrastructure, which means the people who are going to be there, they will be using the process, and then the infrastructure is going to be used as based on the process, and you are going to achieve the deliverables what we have. Now, what is that going to be there as part of the information management system? You're going to create, or you are going to receive the information or data, and that is what you are going to process, and you are going to store it, and that is what you are going to transfer, or you are going to use it. And when we are doing this, in between there are always going to be risks. These risks are going to be there. These risks, what will happen, they will be okay. So there are going to be risk always. Risk is something, as I said yesterday, the definition of a risk is if anything that comes between us and our target, that is what we call as a risk. So sometimes when you are trying to store our data, the information, it will get destroyed, or it will get corrupted, or sometimes we'll be losing it. These are the risks that we'll be facing. And by having an information management system, we need to ensure that these sort of risks are going to be identified well in advance, and then you are going to have some control measures so that you will have the information saved always, and then it is going to be protected. That is what is the purpose of having information management system. On one side, it is going to provide certain processes to deal with the data that we have, which is something like creating, receiving, storing, sending, and other things. On the other side, it is also going to give some tools so that we will be in a position to mitigate the risks that are going to be there, either as a preventive measure or as a response. Now, information system, why it is, how it is going to be used. The information that we are going to store is going to be used in different contexts. In the same organization also, the same information is going to be viewed with the different perceptions. So that's what we see here. For the working force, the information what we have is only going to be used for automating their activities and enabling certain operation what they do on a daily basis. But for the middle management, the same information is going to let them track and manage in a better way, because it's going to talk about what is the quality result, what are the controls, what are the QC quality control activities that are happening, what are the results. So based on this reports, what they are going to get from the MIS, they should be managing the projects in a better way. That is the middle management advantage, because of getting the advantage. Whereas the senior management, they can take decisions based on the data. The more data that you have, the better decision that you are going to take. And that is where information system is going to help senior management. And the top level executives, they can build a strategy based on the information what they are going to get. Because when you are looking at the data at the very top level, very high level, it is going to clearly say where we are leading, what are the opportunities that are there. So these things are going to be used by these top executives, especially the top management, and then they can strategize where they will have to, in which direction organization has to move. So that is how the information system is going to be useful for employees at different levels. And each of these objectives are going to be entirely different. But when you have a structured way of having information stored, that is going to help all these levels of employees to meet their individual requirements. And we talk about information asset, even just now we were talking about that. There are two types of information assets that are available, physical and virtual, physical and logical. Now, what is the meaning of that? Anything that is going to be physical, which means we can see and touch, that is what is a physical asset. And first of all, when you say information asset, anything that holds information as part of it. So if we have a attendance register, which is going to be signed every day, that is also information asset because it is a physical notebook where everyone is going to sign. So the sign, date and time, name, all these things are going to be information that is going to be stored, and that is a physical one. Whereas if you are writing the one what we are looking at the presentation, what we see here is a soft copy. So it is going to be more of a logical one. So there are going to be multiple assets. Like if you have an application, suppose you are running SAP, or you have some ERP running your organization, then it has a lot of information part of that. So the information that is going to be there all going to be in a database. That database itself is going to be information asset. So anything that is going to hold some sort of information, we call that as an information asset. Now, why should we go to that level? Because one of the main things is we will be identifying a owner for every information asset. And when we are going for risk management, one of the main things that we do is we will be identifying the risk based on every information asset that we have. You're going to see more when we come to that screen. Now we talk about information security. So far we have been talking about information system, then information asset. Now we are talking about information security. Now how to ensure that the information that we have is going to be secure? Before that, why it should be secure? That's a question that we have. The reason for that is the information of our organization is going to be critical. And probably in terms of the information that we have, we do not want our competitors to see how we are doing, what we are doing. Or sometimes as an employee, I should not be allowed to see the information related to my colleagues. So there are going to be different reasons where the confidentiality of the information is going to be defined, which means everybody cannot see everyone's information. So there is going to be a way of filtering the data so that information should be visible to only some people. And that is one thing. The other thing is we will be losing the information. We already seen there are going to be risk of losing the data, risk of getting data corrupted, risk of losing, deleting. All these risks are going to be there. And how are we going to have some controls so that these things are not going to happen? Or even if it is going to happen, we will be having some mitigation plan. So that is what is information security. Now, as part of this information security, what are the things which are going to be very critical? There are three things which are always, whenever we talk about information security, we always talk about CIA: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, confidentiality is a property that talks about to whom it is going to be visible. It's any information that is there. All three are related to the information. And when we say that confidentiality, that means what is to whom that information is to be made visible. And integrity is one thing, which is talking about the data integrity, which means the accuracy of that one. So whenever we have a data, the information, that information should be same everywhere, irrespective of where we are viewing. That is a data integrity, what we talk about. So it should not get corrupted. So suppose you are doing some activity and it should get, if it is corrupted, then we are losing that integrity there. The third one is availability. Availability is as long as I'm going to have access based on the confidentiality level that I am having, I should be in a position to get access to these data, this information. How to ensure that? That is what is availability. So when you say that you have a mail server, that mail server is going to be available for me from anywhere, every time. So even if I'm going to travel all over the world. At any point of time, if I want to access my mailbox, it should be available. That is what is availability, what we talk about. So depending on customer requirement, availability is going to change. Integrity, availability, and confidentiality. Especially confidentiality and integrity, always we look for 100% to achieve that one. Whereas availability, sometimes it is going to be depend on how customer is expecting. Apart from these in three major things, we will be also having something like other characteristics properties here: authenticity, accountability, non-repudiation, and reliability. Now, in this one, authenticity is the way that you are going to get access to that. How are you going to do that one? Accountability is who is going to own that, any information, who is going to own that one. Non-repudiation, so you are going to say that the same thing is not ability to prove that occurrence of claimed event. That means you are going to repeat it when something is happening. You should be in a position to repeat and see that how that has happened. That is what is at one. And reliability is consistency of the data behavior, the way that it's there. Like you have a website, and every time when I go to check that URL, and that website should be coming there. So reliability is the one thing. Reliability is something different from availability. It may be available, but accesses may not be reliable. That is the difference. Availability is still there, but reliability is every time I don't get connected to that one. That is what is the reliability, what we call. But primarily, as part of information security, we will be focusing on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, these three are called CAA. That is the triad of CAA. So how are you going to do that one? So anything that is going to be there, any incident, and again, what is incident? When a risk is going to occur. Risk is something that is always going to happen in future. So risk, that is why that is a difference between risk and issue. Issue is an ongoing thing. For issue, you will be having a solution as part of your plan. For risk, it may happen or may not happen. That is the speciality of the risk. So for risk, you will be having a plan, but it is not going to be an ongoing one. It may happen or may not happen. The idea of probability is attached to that one. So when we have a risk, when it is going to occur, then we are going to see what is that risk is going to affect either of these things: integrity, availability, or confidentiality, which means confidentiality is broken. So that means somebody has stolen our data. Availability is not there, server is down, so that you are not in a position to get information. Integrity is lost. It is there, availability is there, my user ID is working, but still when I see that data is corrupted. So all three are going to be equally important for our information security. So when you say information security, that's going to be referring all the three, availability of all three of these things. Now, information security management system is a way by which you are going to have processes so that you are going to collect it, process it, store it, transmit these things. So you are going to come out with a way to do this one. And also you are going to have a way whereby you will be identifying the risks. You're going to identify the risks and then how we can address them so that the risk can be mitigated. So you are going to have that as part of that. And then as part of this risk management, you are going to identify vulnerabilities. As we already seen, any risk that is going to be there, which is going to be of two things that are going to be associated. One is the probability and the other one is the impact. So when we say that we are going to mitigate the risk, we will always be working on these two. Now, when you say that we are going to have some solution, the solution is always going to be on the vulnerabilities in our system. So when virus is attacking, virus attack is a threat that we have. So the solution for that is not removing the virus everywhere from the world, which is not in our control. The only way what we are doing is we see that what are the vulnerabilities that are there in our system and see that how we can minimize the vulnerability so that this virus is not going to enter into our system. So always the risk management is going to be from our side. Any solution that you are going to give, any risk mitigation activity that you are going to have is not going to mitigate the threats that are going to come. It is only to minimize the vulnerabilities that we have in the system, especially in IT, information security. Always we look for how to minimize the vulnerabilities so that the damage that is going to be caused is going to be less. Because every risk that we have, every threat that we are going to see, those threats are from external areas. So we will not be having any control on that. Nothing can be done on the sources of it, on the threat itself, and also on the impact by which it is going to damage our system. The only possibility for us is look out the vulnerabilities in our system and then see that how we can minimize the vulnerability. That's why our main major thing that as part of our risk management is to identify vulnerabilities and then see that how we can minimize that. So that is the security control what we talk about. When we talk about control, as I said, there are going to be three things that we have in any project. You have a plan, you have an execution, and something like monitoring and control. So if nothing is there, no problem is there, then the execution is going to be in sync with the plan. It is always in sync with the plan, and at the end, you are going to get the target what you are looking for. But this is never going to happen in a real-time scenario because there are going to be thousands of risks that are there in this environment, and all these risks are going to occur one after another randomly. And the only way to do that one is you need to know how to monitor them. So monitoring is one thing which is always going to see how the execution is going to be deviating from the plan. So whenever there is a deviation that is going to happen, it is going to alert us, and then we know that risk is occurred or just going to occur. So we will be having a control measures available, the mitigation activities. We are going to apply that and then remove that risk or minimize the risk. That is how we are going to do that one. That is what we call as information security controls. What sort of controls that we have? So when we go for control measures, they have been categorized into 4 types based on the nature of them. So organizational controls, people controls, physical controls, and technological controls. So depending on how they are associated with. So when we say organizational control, you are going to come out with a policy, set of rules and roles and responsibilities. You are going to set up a team as part of our organization, and the way that you are going to classify information, you have a way, methodology by which you are going to have some controls. That is going to be common. This particular thing, when we talk about organizational control, it is going to be common across all information assets that we have. Whereas there are certain controls which are going to be done on people. So it means every person, when they want to access, they will have to use their login. So login has to be created for every user, and this login has to be every 3 months. You will have to change that one. So these are all controls that are going to be on the people, so that we do not want people to be source for any risk that is going to come. So that is a people-based controls. The third one is a physical control. So anybody who is going to come in, fire, or any of the natural calamities that are happening. So these things are going to damage the physical information asset. Because of that, we'll be losing our information. How are we going to protect that? Like power failure, power cut, or if it is going to be flood, if it is going to be earthquake, all these things are going to be affecting that. All these physical controls, we will see that how are we going to do that one, theft and other things. And the last one is very important as part of IT. This is what is going to have 70 to 75% of the attack. What we have is a technological control. So this is going to be based on how the network, the logical network is going to be hacked. So we see that how are you going to, what sort of control that we have to bring in. One thing is within the network, you are going to allow only those people who have a valid access rights, and all the information access are going to be restricted. Anybody cannot go. You are going to restrict it based on various ways of doing that one. And then you secure the authentication. When you say that even though I can be part of the network, I cannot have access to every server that is going to be available. And periodically, I'll be doing a malware check so that I ensure that no malware is going to be installed in any of the machines that we have in the net what I have. And periodically again, I'm going to look for the vulnerabilities in my system, so that once I identify some vulnerability, then I'm going to have a measure to minimize that. So these are the technological controls. But when we say that it is easy, but that's a huge list that we have. To get these things done, what you see here, to get this information security control, especially when you talk about information security management system, ISMS, we always, one of the major popular standard what we have is ISO standard 27001. So 27001 is a standard which is specific for information security management system, which has a list of 114 different controls, which will be catering the needs of all these 4 categories of control that we are looking for. Using that, we are going to come out with a process, and we'll also be having tools so that we will be having a better way of controlling these risks when they are going to come. Now, whenever we talk about information security management system, it is purely a risk management job, because What we are looking is a specific type of risk, which is information theft or information security. So information security or information leakage is the one that we are going for it, and then we see that how we can manage that one. So that's what we do here. So when it comes to risk, how are we going to handle that? Risk management. Now, risk management, there are various methodologies that are there in the industry as practice. One of the things that we have is you have from the ISO, you have 31010, 31000, which is a risk management, or specifically for our ISMS related one, you have 27005, which is specific to this. Apart from this, we will also, there are certain frameworks that are available from ISACAR. Then you have something like FMEA. There are multiple tools that are available, methodologies that are available for managing risk. And most of the thing, when organizations are there, most of the organizations, they will be having a risk management framework. So that framework is going to be used in every management system that they want to have. So part of the management, risk management, what you are going to have is, first thing is you need to identify the risk. Knowing the risk is the first thing. Unless you know what type of risks that are there, you will not be in a position to go for a mitigation for that one. So first thing is we are going to identify. When we are going to identify, we are going to look into these 4 types, and then these are the 4 types, right? The nature of the controls. So you are going to look for the 4 types and then identify the risks that are going to be there. So when we are identifying, there are 2 ways of doing that. One, you go by the information asset, or you go by the process. So you have a process that is going to be defined in an organization, business process. So you're going to pick each of the activity part of our business process and see what are the risks that are related to information security there. So otherwise, you're going to pick the information asset. So you have a server, you're going to see what are the problems it is going to face. Now, when we are going to see what type of risk that is there, how to identify a risk, always we see that if we have an information, how this CIA, confidentiality, data integrity, and availability is going to be affected if something is going to happen. So what are those things that are going to have an impact on these 3, either of that or as a collective one? That is what we call as a threat. So that is what we are going to identify as part of the risk identification. So identifying is the first thing. Unless you identify, we will never know like what are the risks that we have. And as a second one, what we have is a risk analysis, which means we are trying to understand the risk. Each of the risks that we have already identified, we try to understand them. What is the meaning of understanding? Each risk is associated with 2 characteristics, 2 properties. One is the probability in which it is going to occur. The other one is when it is going to occur, what is the impact that it is going to create. So impact and probability, these are the 2 things that are going to be there. And we will be analyzing the impact and the probability of each of these risks. Now, this probability is something which is going to make the risk occur or not to occur, and impact is the one which is going to make our job a problem, because the impact is less, then it is not going to have an effect on our activities, and impact is more, we need to go for some mitigation activity. Now, once we identify these things, once we start analyzing these 2, probability and the impact, then we will try to quantify them, which means you are going to get the value for that one. Once you have the values quantified for these 2, then you are going to find the product of that. So product of the impact and the probability is going to give us a risk value, and that risk value is the one which is going to be used for prioritizing the risk. Why do you want to prioritize? Now, again, the question. The reason for that is when you are identifying the risk, there are going to be hundreds of risks. In an organization, say if it is going to be of around 200, 250 employees are working in an organization, if you start identifying the risk related to information security, you will end up with 350 or 400 risks very easily. Now, when you have 400 risks, it is not going to be possible for us or any organization to come out with a risk treatment plan for every risk. And that is also not required, because most of the risks are, the probability of them occurring is going to be very less. So that is the reason we are evaluating the risk. So when you are quantifying these 2, impact and the probability, then the risk value is going to be based on the risk value. We are going to see which are those risks which are having higher impact value or higher probability. So only for them we are going to consider that we will be having a plan. Now the question again is, why should I plan? Why should I break my mind, break my head to do all these things? When the risk is going to occur, I'll do whatever I want that point of time. Why should I look for these things and then break my head and scratch my head. The justification for that is if you are not prepared for it, you may not even know what type of risks that are there. Okay, suppose you are visibly it is happening, some risk is going to occur, visibly you are seeing, then you are taking a decision, okay, let's go for a mitigation for that one. Then by the time you are going to come out with a plan, the impact is already crossed 100%. So having the plan is not going to be of any use at all. That is why, as part of our risk management, the first thing that you are going to do is that you will have to make yourself prepared for the risk, which means you are going to identify the risks so that you need to know what are the risks that are there. Then you are going to evaluate it and then see for which risks you are going to be prepared. Then for each of the risks that you have decided that you should be prepared, you will be having a mitigation plan. So by monitoring, you will know how these risks are going to grow. And then based on that, you are going to make a decision whether you want to apply the treatment plan or not. Okay, now we are jumping into data privacy. As I said, data privacy is part of information security. Now, what is a definition for data privacy? Now, when we talk about data privacy, it is related to individual. The ability of an individual to determine for themselves when and how he can, or what extent the personal information about them can be shared or communicated. So, any information that is going to be there as an individual, my information is going to be with an organization. How that information is going to be used by that organization, I should be having a right to do that one. That is what is data privacy. So it is my, after all, it is going to be my data. So it is my right to say whether they can do any of the activities that they are supposed to do, whether they can communicate or share my information to others. So that is what is the data privacy all about. So if it is going to be something related to me, I should be the right person to say whether that can be made public or not. That is what is data privacy, and this is going to be the information, because this information is specific to us. And when we talk about information security, the previous one, which is going to be the entire information that we have. Suppose you have a ERP. As part of ERP, you are going to have a lot of information related to your products, your raw materials and other things, logistics and other things. They are all related to organization overall. That's why we maintain them. That is, their confidentiality is required. But when we talk about the personal information, that is what is going to have special meaning, because it is related to my thing. So I should be in a position to make a decision on that. That is where the data privacy is going to be. The three elements of data privacy is the right of an individual to be left alone. So he is the person, so the individual has to be left alone. He should be having the right to control over his personal data. That is number one. Second one is you need to ensure that the personal data are going to be protected. That is where the information security is going to come. As long as the information, as long as my information is going to be residing in the organization should have a process by which this information is going to be secured, which means information security should be there. ISMS should be applied for that data, and there my data is going to be secured. That is what I'm expecting, and it should be complied to various protection laws that are there. So these are the three things that are expected for for data privacy, what we are looking for. Now, the difference between the information security and the data privacy, we did see that one already. Now, addresses policies, because when we talk about information security, we are talking about the process. What are the things that are to be there? Whereas in privacy, it is going to be the decisions that are going to be taken, whether should I do or not. So that is the decision that is going to be taken by the individual. Applying required restrictions, defining who has access to data. So that is an individual has to make a point there. Companies ensure protection, user control privacy. So it is the user who is going to say what should be protected, what should be made public. So he is going to make a decision. Then this is always going to be information asset centric, because your whole system is going to be specific related to information asset, whereas this one is always going to be data subject centric. Data subject is a user centric. That's how it is going to be there. And that is why, as part of your data security, you are going to have 4 types of controls. And these controls are going to help to provide the level of security that we are expecting to provide this second point here, because we need to have a process there to handle, process, collect, and share of personal data, which should be intact, which should be safe. And that is what is going to be done by data security. Whereas the data privacy, as part of that, it is always a consent. If the data is going to be shared or communicated by the organization, it should be purely on the consent of the individual. So we are going to base, that has to be based on that one. And then there are going to be other things that we'll be doing. We're going to see the different types of rights that any data subject is going to be having. Okay, now when we go a little bit deeper into that, what we have something is called personally identifiable information. Any data that is going to, through which you should be in a position to find whose data is that. If you are in a position to identify the owner of that particular information, data, then we call that as a personally identifiable information. It can be a name, or it can be a social security number, Aadhaar number, or whatever passport number, another thing, which is going to be the source, so that when you try to look into that, you'll see who is that guy. So that is the personally identifiable information, which is going to be very critical. The second part of that is, this is specific to healthcare. So as part of the healthcare, any individual's medical records are going to be stored as part of that. That's also going to be valid, critical. So we need to consider that DPIA is going to be applicable only in US, whereas PIA is applicable everywhere across the world. Personal data, what we talk about is, this is a definition what we see here, information relating to natural person. When you say natural person, it's a human being what we have. So who are going to be the citizens of organization. So they who can be identified from the information in questions and directly identified. So they are the people who are going to be there, and their information is called personal data. There are going to be special categories of personal data related to criminal conviction or some of the things. We are going to see the list also later. So that is going to have a special way of application. We will be doing it in a different way. Then whenever we want to process the data, sometimes the person need not be, the person name, that is PIA information, should not be revealed. So if you want to do that one, when the controller is going to send the information to the processor, in such cases, controller will pseudonym the identification and send to the processor. So processors is going to run that one and get the output. So processors will never know whose data is. So when it is going to come back, then the controller will be knowing about that. That is how what is called pseudonymous. You are going to have some unique ID given to every security number, so that when it is going to come back, you are going to, based on the mapping, you are going to remap that. Then any person who has already died so his information is not going to be considered as his personal data. Information about companies, because it is only talking about individuals. So information about companies and public authorities are not going to be part of our PIA. And information about individuals acting as traders, employees, then their data is going to be available. Anybody who is an individual, their individual information is always going to be part of that. Now, what we talked here is the grammar. What should be considered as a personal data? Next step is, what are the activities that can be done with that data? The processing. What type of processing that should be do, and what are the processing that are to be considered as lawful, legal processes? One of the things is, first you need to get a consent. Without having a consent, you should not be, that is, consent should be, you should get the consent from the data subject. When we talk about data subject, it is the person whose data we have. So consent is the one that we'll have to do, and then we'll also be having a contract, whether we'll have to do this or not. And whenever we do a process, there should be a legitimate interest, which means the process that we are going to do, that should be requested by the data subject, or it is requested by the government. Otherwise, just because I don't have any other job, I want to process it and keep it ready. That's not the way that processors should do. So legitimate interest should be there. Any activity that we do with the data, there should be a meaning, and controller should give permission to the processing organization. Critical interest, in case of some critical interest, we can do that one. So when we are traveling and we met with an accident, he was going alone, we do not know who is he, then in that case we are going to see that from his personal identity, you are going to find the information, and based on that you are going to save his life. That is a critical interest what we talk about. Legal requirement, when you want to go for a legal requirement to settle the things, then also this personal information are going to be used as part of our public one. And for public interest, sometimes we will be doing something. It's most of the time for R&D and other things, we will be making use of most of the time there's going to be a collective information that's going to be used Okay, now we are coming to consumer. Now we are moving slightly from data subject to consumer. When we talk about data subject, it is not, it doesn't mean that my data that is going to be with my employer. So that is also going to be part of our PII, but it is not necessary that only as an employee, my data is going to be with an organization. There are different ways my information is going to be with any organization. So that is why it says consumer rights. That's why the consumer name is brought into this one. When I am going to buy something, so all my buying habits, the way that I am doing, what sort of things I buy, all these things are also going to be saved, because this is what is going to be, that information is going to be with the seller. So he is the guy who is going to make use of that information. Like we discussed yesterday, every activity that we do as part of our Amazon or something, they watch that. They watch that and then see that what is the pattern, what is our interest, where we show more interest. Are we showing more interest on electronics, or are we showing on apparel? So they are trying to get the pattern based on how many times we are clicking, and then based on the pattern, they will be using that for converting us into their leads, because it is a business. That is where the information is going to be used. So an organization is going to use my habits, and then it is going to use for its own purpose. Now that is where the consumer right is coming. So as a consumer, should I allow that to happen or not? That is what is a right. So when we say that subject, data subject, it doesn't mean that we need to be an employee of an organization. We can be like you would have visited a hospital. We were in the hospital for checkup, or it can be in the any of the shops that you have gone, or you might have traveled in some of the flights or any train or somewhere. Everything, wherever we go, whatever we do, the activities are going to be always having some information. That information is going to be with them, and that information they can make use of that for trending. So they're going to see that, getting the pattern out of that, and then see, and then they will try to change us into their leads. So when they are trying to change that as leads, then they are going to push their information to us. Now, whether we need to give that right to them or not, that's what is called consumer rights. So as a consumer, we can have rights to, a lot of rights are going to be, these are the rights that are there: right to access, right to request. Access, so that you can get the access, is see your information yourself. Right to request is you are going to ask them so that they will provide the information that is related to me. Right to know, I need to know what you do with that. So you are processing it, what do you do with my record? So you are going to ask them, and they're obliged to answer to that, response to that. Right to delete. So I say that I do not want delete that. So I was sick for 3 months. That information you have, you remove that. I do not want that me being sick for 3 months should be there in public. You remove that. That information is also going to be, that right also have, because customer has right to opt out. You are already in a process, you say that I do not want to part of it and want to get out from that one. So that means right to opt out is opting out from a process. Right to delete is you are going to delete one of the attributes or group of the attributes that we have. Right to notification of financial incentive, this is one thing. Not even financial, other things also, you are going to get some notifications. So something like if you are looking for a loan, we are giving an offer for you. So that is a financial incentive what we talk about. So whether I should be getting such mails or not, because when I'm going to get some mail like that, that means they have in their database my mail ID is there. How did they get that one? That is what is the right. I need to know first, how did you tell me, how did you get this? Then he's going to say, once you came to our shop and you have filled in your mail ID. So from there we picked it and we are using it. Now, so okay, if that is the case, I want to be opted out from this one. Don't include me hereafter. So that is what is opting out from the notification. So then right not to be discriminated against. Some other things are going to be discrimination. It can be racial one, or it can be other things that are there. So all these things are going to be there. Yeah, CCPA is related to that one. Consumer or data subject is going to be same. It is only that how we were personal data is going to be there. That's what we are going to see. Now, sources of data privacy tasks, there are multiple sources. How we are going to do that one. So the activities that we do is you are going to create a data inventory. You're going to classify the data. All data is not going to be same. You're going to classify something as something is going to be public, something is going to be private, something critical, something secret, confidential. Based on the confidentiality of the information, you are going to classify them. By classifying, you can take a decision based on that. That's why we go for that. Third-party relationship, always the companies, when they want to do the data, when they want to do some process, they will be using some third party. That relationships, in that case, how the relationships are going to share or communicate my data as a personal data. Portability and erasure, for how this data is going to be portable, when we are going to delete or erase it. Data security, how to ensure that your data is going to be, so okay, I agree, you are given an agreement. So we have an agreement between you and me that you are not going to misuse my data. What if the data is going to be stolen from your database? Now you tell me how you are protecting that. That is where the data information security is going to be there. That's why information security is the base and privacy is sitting on that one. So data security is a must for data privacy. Consent we are going to give, and oversight and monitoring. All these activities is somebody has to monitor and then oversee that. So how are we going to do that one? These are the activities that are going to be there. Now we are coming to subject actors access request. Subject is data subject, the consumer or data subject. Then they are going to raise a request for accessing the data. Now what site of request? So the flow is something like this. Request is going to be raised, and then the moment the organization is going to get a request, it is going to check for identity. It's going to check whether the person who is asking is a genuine or not. How to do that one? They will be always first thing, if it is going to be sent by a mail, is going to check whether the same mail ID is registered there or not. If it is going to be from phone call, then they are going to raise some questions. They are going to tell me so there are going to be ways to identify, right? Tell me what is your pet name, or there are going to be some ways where you already agreed with them. They are going to raise that question. We are going to respond based on that. They will verify that the person who is calling is the right person. Then the data subject request, then it is going to be reviewed and it is going to be responded, and the information is going to be archived. So this is how every request that is going to come from a data subject is going to be verified and then responded, and then it is going to be archived. Now, what are the rights that are possible? This is going to be applicable for every type of thing that we are going to see today. Right to access personal data, access. That's the first thing. I should be given access so that I can see what my information is. The right to rectification. So any change that I want, you're given my database date of birth is wrong one, or I was in one city earlier, now I switched over to some other place, so I need to change the city. So rectification should be possible. Right to erase. I want to erase some information which I don't want to be available publicly. And the right to restrict data processing. For this particular data processing, I don't want to be part of it. So you are going to say that I am opting out or something. Right to be notified. So for which things I should be notified before that process is done. Portability. When I'm going to ask some data, in what format are you going to give? I would prefer to having in a spreadsheet. So you give in this format. So that is also data portability is also one thing. Right to object. You are going to object when something has happened. You say that no, you can raise that. You can object that. Object is something different from yesterday. We talked about that. Object is something different from erasure. Erasure is going to be, yeah, these are all absolute. Yes, correct. Right to reject automated individual decision making. All these things are going to be based on how an individual is going to raise. So these are going to be specific. Sometimes you can say that my name itself, I want my name itself to be removed. That means the entire data subject, it doesn't want to be part of the database. In that case, you'll have to oblige and then remove that person from the database itself. So it depends on what is the level of request that it's going to be. That's how it is going to be. Whenever we have a data subject, it can be two types. It can be a major, which means above 16 or 18, depends. In some countries, above 18 is considered as a major. In some countries, 16 is considered as a major. So when it's going to be a minor, the minor cannot raise a request. Somebody has to do that one. So it is always going to be authorized. They can authorize a third party to get the request raised. And then you did talk about why do we need a third party. Sometimes it is possible that you need to authorize so that they will be talking in terms of the data subject. And then they're going to raise. And whenever you are raising a request, SAR, subject access request, then you can follow it up. If it is not responded, you can raise that as a concern. Even if it is not responded, you can complain also. How to complain? That's going to be different from every methodology that we have, every act that we have, we're going to see later. Apart from this, data subject information can be asked by public, that is going to be the government side. for certain activities. That's what is given here. For crime or regulation, judiciary requirement, there are multiple requirements which are there for which individual information can be asked for. Then it has to be published. The processing or the controlling agency should give this information to government agencies when they are asked for. Now there is something called special category data. What we have already seen is PIA. PIA is personally identifiable information. Special category data is something where it talks about their affinity on certain areas, which normally most of us, we do not want to say that in open, say that in public. So what ethnic, where I belong, race, ethnic and race origin, philosophical and religious belief, I do not want that to be part of my, nobody should know that which religion I am. So I do not want that to be disclosed. Political views, I do not want to be considered as a left or right or whatever political parties that are there. Membership of trade union, that's also just my personal. I don't want to be available on public. Then the biometric data utilized for recognizing a person. All this information are going to be available. So that should not be normally, that's a one. Then health data. We already have seen that in HIPAA related one. And the genetical information that are going to be there. Genetic information is different from health data. Health data is related to the disease and health related illness, whereas genetic data is talking about the DNA related one, which is going to be used in, sometimes it is used as part of our legal actions also. Okay, now we are talking about future of data privacy. What are the trends that are there? There are different trends and there are different ways we can look at this. I tried to collect few of them. One of the things is more and more countries, they are formulating rules. Like if you see that most of the countries, they have this rule, either completed one or in a draft stage. That means when you want to do business with multiple countries, more and more countries are having, so you need to adhere to that. Compliance is required. And regulatory, because of that, your regulatory pressures are going to increase if you want to do business in various. The more countries you want to do business, the more regulatory pressure you are going to have. Increased demand of multi-standard compliance. As we already seen, 27,001 is one standard. For risk, there will be another standard. For privacy, there will be another standard. So you have 7 or 8 standard minimum that should be there, and you'll have to comply to all of them. So when you get exposed more and more, you are supposed to comply to multiple standards. That is also one of the things that is happening. So normally, if you are running your own thing, then if you are moving to cloud, then it is going to be 27,017, 18. There are a lot of things that are there as part of this information security and privacy. So depending on what you want to comply, the scope is ever increasing. Every day there is an increase with respect to the compliance. Then integrated data security and data privacy system. So far we have been talking about information security is one thing and data privacy is another thing, and data privacy is sitting over data security. So over a period of time, this difference will merge, and then so difference will go, and these two should merge together. So the moment we say that data security, it should take care of data privacy also. That's how the thing will come, and that is what is a trend that is going to take place. Then increased awareness among public. Now more and more public know that people are using their data. So far we never know that our data have been used. But now people start thinking that their data is there and they are making money out of our own data. So they want to have more control on their own data. That is, awareness is going to, when the awareness is going to be more, then the requests are going to be more. More people are going to give the request and then change the rights what they have. So when they are going to execute rights, then more people are going to do, more activities are going to happen. So increased opportunities for compliance roles, because the more compliance is required, you need more people to do that one. That is one of the biggest opportunities that we have. And then as of now, since this information is always now, as of now, it is more related to information technology. And now we are going towards cloud technology. Now data protection will be given as a service also in future. Data security and data protection will be given as a service, because these things are part of cloud technology. So the entire game plan is going to change. So these are the future trends that we have. So this is the first one, data protection, what we talk about. In this one, across the world, 71% of countries, they have some legislation. 9% of the countries, they are still in draft. Then 15 countries, there is no legislation, and 5 countries that don't even have data. Now, if you look at this one, 80% of countries are having some way or other, they have data protection laws. So now some of the countries, they started is very seriously. Some countries, they just started doing it. Now, if this is the case, any organization which is going to do business with multiple countries, then they will have to adhere to that many laws, that many standards. That's what is going to make the job tougher. Regulatory pressures, that's the same thing what we are talking about. The more standard, more countries, then it is going to have more standards. So regulatory pressure is always going to be there. So in that case, you are going to build your system in a much better way, because you are going to have a single system which will be catering requirements of various standards, and then that is what is going to increase the level of quality that we are going to provide as far as data security and privacy is concerned. And then the innovations that are there, Internet of Things, that is the one which is happening. And this is also one of the things which is bringing a change in the entire thing. The multi-standard compliance that we did talk about that. Now we are moving into GDPR, General Data. This is where we left yesterday. So we are now starting that. So now GDPR is specific to Europe, General Data Protection Regulation. So it is specific to Europe. In fact, UK was part of it initially, but now UK is coming out, and it is coming out with its own GDPR. So that is also one of the another system that we need to add. What is GDPR? What it talks about? In what way it is different from information security? This is related to data protection, but it is related to data privacy, main thing. It started in 2016, but it actually whole thing has got in only recently it's become popular, and then now it has become a mandatory that GDPR should be, we need to be in compliance. Who are going to be in compliance? Any organization in the world which is going to do any sort of business with any of the organizations that are there within Europe, they need to be in sync with GDPR. That is the expectation. So that's what is going to be. Globally, the way that they are going to have their act there, it's going to have an effect globally. And that is the biggest problem that we have. The countries, which especially countries like India, where they are doing these jobs as outsourced activities, they need to, though GDPR is not going to be applicable in India directly, but since they are doing job related to Europe organization, they need to adhere to that one. So that is what is the requirement. That is where we talk about more on GDPR than other standards. Now the structure, what we have seen yesterday also, we have just started this. So this GDPR has got 99 articles. You have a regulation act that is there. It has 99 articles. Out of that, these articles, it talks about various things, like what are the things that are expected from the subject point of view, what are the activities that are expected from the controller, the processor, and the data DPO, how these things are going to happen. So we are going to see that out of this 99, at least 2/3 of the articles are going to be specific to the organization where GDPR is going to be in compliance. Now, to understand these articles more, there are 173 recitals are given. Recitals are more of an explanation for the articles that are there. It gives by, sometimes it is giving some examples so that you can understand. As a commentary, it is given there. Now, all these articles are going to be based on these 7 principles. These 7 principles, what you see here is the basis. It talks about the first one, transparency, because anything that we do, the information about the individual, there should be a transparency that has to be fairness and transparency that has to be executed. And purpose limitation, whatever purpose for which we are running the process, you should limit it. You cannot do something which you are not supposed to do. Even the processor himself, he cannot do on its own. Only when the controller asks, he has to do that one. The purpose is always going to be limited. When you want to do, you will have to do only for that subject. Minimization, when the data is going to be sent from the processor to the controller to the processor, now the processor will get only that data that is going to be required. So when in a data format, you can visualize there are going to be multiple columns and multiple rows. So depending on what you want to do, you are going to slice it, and you are going to give only those columns and only those rows, so that only the minimum data is going to be with the processor, so that you are trying to minimize the risk that is going to be there happening at processor side. Accuracy is always one that we are expecting. Limitation of storage, because this data has to be stored for a longer duration. So how are we going to do that one? And again, As long as these data is going to be processed, stored, or communicated, how do you ensure integrity and confidentiality? This is where our information security is going to sit. So to get this integrity and confidentiality, you need to have information security management system in place. And then accountability. Accountability is the basis. Every activity that we do, that should be accountable. Like every process, there should be a person who should be accountable for it. Every information asset, there should be a person accountable for that. If you do not have that one, if something goes wrong, you will not ask anybody specifically. That's why we want to have that one. And apart from that, you also have the rights. We did talk about that, the same thing that is given here, right to be informed, access, rectification, erasure, restrict processing, all these rights are going to be part of that. So as part of this GDPR, using this 99 article, and to understand here 133 recitals, you will be applying the 7 principle to ensure that these rights are going to be available for every consumer that is there. And this is going to be applicable for any organization where it wants to hold the data. Now, how that is going to be possible? Because any organization, which you say, even if you're going to be a credit card processor, then definitely you have certain information that is there. So almost like every shop, every industry, you will be having information about individuals, and you need to ensure that these rights are given, and then you are going to have a way by which these rights can be executed, or these rights can be done by the individual. Okay. Now, what you see is the governance, how that is happening. So you have the GDPR articles, that is what we have seen, those 99 articles. And then in an organization, you are going to have a data processor, data collectors, and there is going to be a DPO. So this DPO can be specific to an organization, or you can be working as a DPO for multiple, depending on the size of the organization. And there is going to be a supervisory authority who is going to be representing GDPR, that is the government side. So this normally it is going to be one supervisory authority for mostly for one country, it will be one person. So he is the overall head, he is the one who will be taking decisions, and he is going to be governed by GDPR. And you are going to have this data available, and the organization is going to use the data, process the data, and then data subject is always connected to that. In case we have seen that one of the workflow that we have seen in the data subject is going to raise a request. If it is not responded by the organization, there is always a way that you can escalate. So this is how you are going to escalate. You are going to escalate to supervisory authority, and then he is going to check with us and then get the things done. So this is the governance framework what we have with respect to GDPR. Now GDPR, data subject access request, that we already seen. So what are the types of access rights that we have? Same thing, request, identity verification, information for data, subject access request, review of information, response to access request, and archiving. All these things are going to be processes that are related to data subject access. Request is going to come from the data subject, the person, individual. You're going to identify verification, then information, same thing that we have already seen. That is what is called data subject access request. This is the workflow that is there for responding to the requests that are coming from data subjects. That's the first thing. You need to have a process, and you should also have a mean by which these things are going to happen. Normally, this is going to be part of our portal. As part of the portal, you can raise that normally, because that is the easiest one, so that you are going to raise a request and then they are going to respond back from that one. So the entire flow that is mentioned here, all these activities are going to be part of that flow that you are going to have. The second part of that is impact analysis. This is DPIA. This is also called, this is what is a risk management. What we already seen something like a risk management, that is what is impact. So data protection impact assessment. If something goes wrong, if a data breach has happened, if it has happened, or you feel that it is going to happen, or as a preventive measure also, you can do this data protection impact assessment. So when you say impact assessment, it is going to tell us what is the impact that has happened. You are going to assess that impact. And one of the things that I mentioned yesterday, you remember that only for 27001 ISO standard, you have something called certification. Certifications are provided by ISO organization itself. They are going to conduct an audit, external audit, and based on the audit, they are going to provide certificate. That certificate is going to be valid for 3 years. Whereas for GDPR, you will not be certified. You will only be assessed because the assessment is going to be done by third party. Nowadays, certification is also started. They are working for that. And that is the reason why ISO has come out with privacy for a security. I mean, they come out with a standard for data privacy. So 27.1. So that particular standard, what you want to have, if you want to get it implemented, then that is what is going to get same thing what you want to do as part of GDPR. So that is one thing. So impact assessment, what we talk about is, it is going to talk about the incidents that are going to happen. This is a common thing, like you can verify that it should be there on the net also. I don't have it handy now, but it's very simple thing. But again, whatever templates that you have, the templates are going to be just a starting point. You need to work on that based on your context of organization. You need to change that if required. So it is going to talk about this particular DPIA is going to talk about the description, the process by which you are going to do your impact assessment. And then it is also going to say what are the foreseeable situations that may lead to personal data breaches. So when you say data protection impact assessment, it doesn't mean that it has to be done only when incidents are happening. It can happen as a preventive measure also. So it is as good as conducting an audit or inspection. So you are going to see that and then see how prepared we are. Where are the vulnerabilities that are there? This is what is going to identify the vulnerabilities in our system. That is what is the thing. Abnormal conditions and reasonably foreseeable situations that may lead to personal data breaches. You are going to identify them and then see what are the vulnerabilities that are there. Once you know the vulnerability, then you are going to see ways to plug that one. Or the other cases, when you know that something has happened, you are going to do a root cause analysis. That means you are going to work on a root cause analysis and then see how you can do it better. That is always there, because by way of doing root cause, what you are going to do that is, you are going to see what has actually happened. Based on what incident that has occurred, you are going to find how you can identify the multiple causes that has created them. So then the causes, based on the causes, you are going to come out with a solution, and that solution will remove the cause so that the this particular risk is going to be minimized. That is how we are going to do this data protection impact assessment. This is one of the major things that we have as part of GDPR implementation. Okay, this is something interesting. In fact, the way that is narrated is one of the beautiful things that we have. What is meaning here is, when you are going to have a system, that is, because as I said, whenever you want to have these rights, all these rights, this whole workflow that is there, this workflow has to be done as part of your portal. That means you need to have a system. So that portal, when you want to have, the way that you are going to design is how we are going to protect the data by design, how we are going to protect the data by default. These are the two things that are there. This is very important, and it is actually the way that is narrated is also very good. When you say the data protection by design, that means when by design, so when I'm going to have a process defined, that the way that process is defined in my organization will ensure that everybody will not be part of it. That means the process will ensure that that any of these processes will be conducted only on the consent of the individual. So the process itself is so defined that it cannot be done without the consent of the individual. That is what is by design. You are protecting the data by design. Second one is data protection by default, which means you are opening up a screen and you are asking the person to make the entries, his choice. So there are going to be 7 or 8 fields that are there. Now, when there are going to be multiple fields where you are going to get the inputs, the default values that you are going to have should not be the one, even if by mistake, if the data subject is going to commit it, you should not force those options where the data subject is not interested in giving. So it is the default value should be the safest one. So that means go back to the rights what we have. The rights what you have, that's what we are going to check here. When you say the right to rectification, now right to erase, now the right to right to restrict, these things should be by default, it should be right to restrict. By default, it should not create a problem there. For every default value, what you are going to have as part of our screen design, the default value should be one which should not be doing some process without the consent of the individual. That is what is by design of the process, and also by default values that you are going to set. So that is a way we are going to do that one. So consent is always going to be important. because you are going to play with the personal data and you have a personal rights. So if you look at this block diagram is clearly talk about that. You always have the consent. For you will be having different rights for personal data, and then you are going to apply the security, and then accountable person is going to do that one. So the impact is going to be done as part of that, and person rights are going to be always available. So the idea here is the way that we are going to define our process should ensure that without the consent, no process will be done, or without the consent, we will not be considering the data from the individual. But if we are considering a new process, so we will not be considering everyone data for that particular process unless they have already agreed for that. If not, we are going to, that is what is by design, same thing by default. Okay, that's what is going to be here. The data protection by design is ultimately an approach to ensure that you consider privacy and data protection process throughout the life cycle. So we are going to ensure that it's going to be there. That's how we are going to get the things done. In this one, what we are actually doing. So how to do this one? So the data protection by design has broad application, developing new IT systems, services, products, processes, because nowadays when the right is going to be there, it is not going to be through phone. Even if it is going to be through phone, activities are going to be, because you are dealing with the information, definitely that information is going to be in the soft version. So you have an information system available for that. In such case, when you want to do that one, you need to ensure that you have by default the process that you are going to decide. The process, and based on the process, you are going to have your application that is going to run this rights. Based on the right, you are going to run the process. That the way that processes are being done, you'll have to ensure that it should not pick values of those individuals where by design. So you'll have to ensure that these things are not going to be there, at least for those information that are special information that should not be taken. That is what is by design, the way the process is defined. The second one is default. So it is what is going to be, you are going to protect the default requires you to ensure that you only process necessary data. So that means you are not going to consider every data. So when a person is going to ask, suppose we say from particular person, you consider that we are an employee of an organization. As part of the employee, you have in the employee master. So there are going to be 72 fields or 75 attributes of the employees that are attached to that one. Now, that information is asked by PF or some one of the partner. Now we want to process that. What do you want to process? We just want to see who are all eligible for increment this year, this month. So in that case, to consider this, that is just to process to find how many people are eligible for increment this month. The information that you want is only the joining date. So when you are going to run this process and you are going to get it outsourced, then the data that you are going to give to them should have the employee ID and the date of joining. So only on that basis, because these are the two minimum things. That is what is a minimization, what we talk about. You give only those which are relevant for the process that they are going to do, so that you are minimizing the risks that are going to happen. That is how you are going to protect. By default, we are going to give that one. This is one thing. The other thing is when you are making a data entry screen, how are we going to ensure that the default value should not be that you will be opting everything. Default value should be like you will not be opting everything. That is most of the things that you can see that, right? When you are going to get a dialog box in any of the windows, you want to commit that yes, no. Then there is one thing called default button. The other one is called the next second option. So default is always going to be the one which is not going to automatically select what the organization is looking for. So that means I should think on that, and I learn to make a decision. So that is what is that. When I make a decision, then only I'll be clicking on that. That's how we'll have to define that. That's how you are going to do that one. Okay. Now the thing what you'll have to look for is whenever you are going to do processing should be, you will be always minimizing the process, which means you process, when you want to process, you process only those with the data, minimum data what you want to do that one. And even when you are doing that, you ensure that you are going to pseudonym it, so that you will not know, the processes will never know whose data is being processed. And then ensure the transparency the functions of the personal data. You'll have to ensure that how transparently these things are happening. Monitoring should be there at every level, and you will also going to ensure that security features are there so that there are no incidents, security related incidents are going to happen. These 5 are always going to be important. How you are going to minimize so that only the required data is going to be given for processing, pseudonymment so that it is not going to be visible. People will not know whose data it is, and then the way the processes are going to be transparent. You need to have a monitoring system. You also ensure that data is secure. This is how we are going to do that one. That's how it is going to be. Normally, this is a process what you have. What you see here, you are going to establish the process, develop, and then organize the data, build the data. Then it goes like this one. And then what you see here is the sort of document that we are going to use. So these documents, what you see here, are the document that you will be either using it or you will be creating it. So when I'm going to establish the project, I'm going to first create questionnaire, the GDPR readiness questionnaire and the project plan. When I'm going to develop the policies, then I'm going to get the policies and the data detention policy. So policies are going to be documented. When I'm going to organize the data protection, then I'm going to define the roles and responsibilities. So you have different roles here, DPO role, supervisory role, supervisory authority. So all these roles are going to be created. And I'm also going to say what is the responsibility and authority. When I'm going to build the data inventory, so that means I'm going to identify the information assets. Then I'm going to see what are the personal data within that one. So I need to identify which are all I should consider as a personal data. So likewise, when you do a data protection here, it should be the impact assessment, what you want to do. So DPIA questionnaire that should be there. This is a DPIA. When you want to transfer the personal data, you see that what policy that you have agreement with the data processors so that nothing is going to be, you have some way of mitigating the risk. Then third-party compliance, agreement with the data processors. Then when the personal data is protected, information security policies, and then whenever you want to handle the data breaches, if it has happened either at our level, at the controller level, or at the data processor level, or at the third-party level, wherever it is happening, we are going to be answerable. So how are we going to deal the breaches? Breach notification, procedure, and data. So whenever a breach has happened, it means you have seen that your data is breached. Somebody has intruded into our system, and you first time you have found that one, either at your place or at the processor's side. Then you need to see first who are the individuals who got affected because of that, the data subjects, and you are going to notify to them that there is a problem that has happened. Your data is already there as part of the breach, and then we are trying to look at the same time. You are also going to inform DPO and the supervisory authority also, depending on the seriousness of the severity of that. That is how the process is going to be implemented. This is the, now we see some of the stakeholders here as part of GDPR. This is specific to GDPR. Whatever slides now you are seeing is only related to GDPR. So you have the data subject, the one individual who is going to be the main thing is data, personal data is only what we have. The controller who is going to establish the purpose and methods of processing. Data processor, sometimes controller will be processing also, but these are two different roles. Or sometimes you'll be getting it done from a different agency, a different one. Then joint controllers, sometimes it will be controlled by more than one controller. Representative, a person who is going to represent the controller or processor, or sometimes it will be representing the data subject also. Then sub-processor. So you are giving to the data processor, and that activity is outsourced again to a sub-processor or third party. And the supervisory authority. So supervisory authority is going to be from the government side, and they are the final authority. They are the public authority, and every member state of European Union, that is every country in Europe, they will be having at least one supervisory authority, and they are the one who will be there on that. We have seen that proper flow, right? Here, he is going to have the final say. The supervisory authority is going to have the final say, and he will be overseeing everything that is happening as part of that. Okay, so that is how we have this stakeholders here. Now we will see some of the responsibilities of these controllers. What we have is not a complete list, but it gives a lot of idea like what we have to work with. So one of the main thing what we have is a controller. What type of responsibilities that we have? As the name suggests, he is a controller, which means he is going to control. He's going to control the activities that are going to be there. So the controller, the term controller is of prime importance since compliance obligations under EU data protection law. So he is only the direct and this is what is controller must adequately record the multiple details. So he is going to record that, and then how long you are going to retain. Retention period is also going to be decided by the controller, because when you are processing the data, you have the raw data first. Based on that, you are going to process. The processed data is going to be saved for some time if required. Sometimes you can decide not to save it also. That is also a decision that is going to be done by the controller. If you want to save, if you want to protect for future use, how long it should be there, you are going to define, and then individual person information subject to processing. Okay, joint controllers. Okay, this is something like you are working on outsourcing. When you are outsourcing it in India from a company, they are doing some activities, and then or within Europe, there are companies spread into multiple member countries of Europe. Then you will be having different things. There is going to be a controller for one area. There is going to be a controller for another country. So you have two different branches. And when the activities are going to happen, there are activities that are going to be done specific to that country. There are certain activities done on the other side. So when something goes wrong, both are going to, or normally the activities that are going to do, both will be doing that. They are going to share. It is the responsibility share, segregation, segregated between different controllers. Now, only thing, if it is a huge organization where a lot of information is there, control is going to be segregated. And one of the main thing is geographical location. That's one of the basis by which you will be doing that. And if it is a huge organization, then based on the activities also, you will be segregating that. It is how to segregate so that you will have more people to focus on that. In that case, it is going to be joint control. Or in some case, when you go for a consortium, this is also one of the things. When you are taking up a project where you form a team, there are going to be 3 companies joined together. So bigger projects, right? Especially when you are working with a very big project. In such case, as a single company, you will not be having enough skills. So in that case, you are going to make a group, make a consortium where 3 or 4 companies, they form a consortium together. In that case, every company will be having, every organization will be having their own controller. Now, in this case, for this particular project alone, where you are going to do together, all these controllers are going to be working as a joint control. The controller is the one who is going to ensure the things are going to be in control, because he is going to be responsible for security of the data, responsible for how we are going to protect the privacy of the data. So he's going to be responsible. So processes are going to be done from various sources. That's why outsourcing is going to happen. Mostly these things are going to be done in other country outside Europe, or sometimes it will be done internally also. It is going to be outsourced to somebody else. When the outsourcing is going to happen, there will be third party also. From there, it is going to be outsourced again. In such cases, any processes who is going to be there, he will be always working in sync with the controller. He cannot do something on his own. Very rarely it is going to be possible. There are cases where that is also possible. Processor can do himself. Whenever controller fails, controller is doing some malpractice, in that case, processor can do it on its own, or sometimes it is going to be directed that he can do directly. Unless otherwise that is the situation, he has to do what controller is asking to do, and every time the data is going to be given by the controller to him, and only that information that he has to do, only those processes he has to run, and then information is going to be given back to him. That is the responsibility what we have. DPO, as I said, it is the responsible officer. We are going to bring some accountability there. Accountability is going to be there. So that is what is the DPO. You will be having a controller, and but DPO is going to be answerable for this one. It's going to be more of a SME in that area. Smaller companies, they will be having DPOs as a consultant. Normally for GDPR, if you are having a small company of 200, 250 employees, you cannot afford to go for having a DPO, and it is also not required. In that case, you may be hiring a consultant who will be doing the same thing for multiple companies. So he is going to give required education and training and conducting audits. He will be the point of contact. If something goes wrong, then he will be talking to the supervisory authorities, monitoring the performance, maintaining the comprehensive records, interfacing with the data owners if something goes wrong. So all these things are going to be rules of data protection officer. In fact, this is going to be more of a advisory role on the top level. But most of the activities are always going to be done by the controller, and processing is going to be done by the processor. Now, this DPO is always going to be talking with supervisory authority. That is the thing. He is a one-point contact for supervisory authority for any activity that is happening. And supervisory authority is the one from the EU. It's from the country-specific one, government one. So that's what we have here. Is going to be the public authority, which means he's going to be a public servant, government servant of that corresponding country, and then he will be playing the role of that, where whenever complaints are coming, when it is going to be escalated, the person will be taking care of that. And if required, he can conduct an audit also at any point of time, creating awareness, approving the rules and other things. Those things are done at the very top level. This is very high level supervisor. This role is going to be very high level, but it is going to play that activities when something goes wrong. If there is going to be a data breach, then supervisory authority is going to play there. He is going to come down, and then he will do all the things that are required if it's going to be severe. So he is going to be responsible in that way. Now, what is that? Now you see that example here, sort of an example here. You have something here. You have the end customer. His web hosting company is there. So through that, he is going to get something. He wants to buy something, so he's going to web hosting company is having the portal, and that is what this end customer is going to do that one. And this has payment gateway and credit card agency is going to do, and they have a customer data. So for this end customer data is there with the credit card agency, and this credit card agency is going to be used as part of our web hosting. And this web hosting is going to be done on behalf of the dealer. So he has his own customer data, because from here he is going to get some customer data, and then he will be in sync with the manufacturer, and he'll also be having customer data. Now, if you look at this one, this is the end customer, and all three of them are having the customer data here. Now, how do you, in this particular scenario, which one is going to be controller and who is going to be the processor? Whereas if you consider the entire operation, dealer is the person who is going to be the controller, and he is going to be a processor. He is also processing the data for credit card related one. When you consider the entire thing, the database that is there with all the activities together, then manufacturer is going to be considered as a controller, and dealer himself will become a processor. So which means there are at times it is possible that a same organization, agency or entity will be playing the role of controller as well as processor also. So sometimes it is going to be very difficult for us to see whether they are doing activities that are related to controller or processor. But when you look deeper into that, that's going to happen. It depends on the workflow that you are going to have. So normally there will be a clear-cut deviation of who is controlling, who is processing. Okay, this is the governance framework. Similar to that, we have seen a little bit complicated here. That's how we have. This is the data subject that are going to be there. They have some rights and they have some personal data where this enterprise, this organization is holding that data. Within that, you have data controllers and data processors, and DPO is actually overseeing that. And then DPO is also in dotted line to this supervisory authority. Now, supervisory authority is going to be with the GDPR, and he is the public servant. Now, principles that we are going to be that GDPR is also based on the GDPR is going to act. Now, the data subject that are there, they are going to give some rights here. They are waiting for that. If nothing is happening, they are going to raise it as a concern. If nothing is happening, they are going to raise it as a complaint here. So either you can go as a complaint to DPO, or even if it is not happening, then they can go directly to the supervisory authority and complain it. And again, when there is going to be the data breach that is happening, it is a responsibility of the DPO to raise that to the supervisory authority. He has to inform within, and then he will also be informing to the data subjects. So that is what is a workflow that we have at the very high level. But as part of our communication plan, we'll have to get this done. That is what is a process. That's why, depending on the type of activities that you do, depending on the availability of the person, these people, the data subjects, your process is going to be different. It's going to be unique for organization to organization. That's why when you go for implementing GDPR, though it is the same act, same standard, based on the individual thing. That is the context of the organization. The way that is implemented is unique. That's how we are going to do that one. Okay, now we are moving to, so any questions here in GDPR? We'll be moving to CCPA now. You search for that, it is available. I think it is available as a PDF also, and the portal also. Just search for GDPR. You should be getting it. You should be very easily. It's a open item. You will get it easily. Get it. There is a document which is, I think it is 130 pages or something. It is available, and it has all the 99 articles and the recitation together. Now, when the dealer is going to be playing as a controller, that's what is the actual thing, right? Because the portal is of dealer, so dealer.com. So dealer.com is owned by this guy, but it is managed by web hosting company. And only for the pay, we are using the credit card agency. Now, when you look at in that perspective, the owner of the entire portal is going to be dealer.com, which is going to be of dealer. So he is going to be the controller. And these two are two different processors. One processor is that is going to be outsourced to the next level. It's a next third party. So first level and third party. That's how we'll have to increase. And the customer data is going to be there. He will be having a different customer data, and if needed, he cannot give all the information to this customer. So there are going to be limitations. So he will be having the information that is going to be entered here. That's what he is going to store here. So California Consumer Privacy Act in 2020, January 1st, it's come into effective. Now this one is for that particular state, which is similar to GDPR. Most of the things are going to be same. It all talks about consumers, their rights, and what is the penalty that they are going to pay if there is going to be a data, some problem, that breach that is happening, then what is the level of punishment, the penalty that you are going to pay. Huge penalties are paid. So now the California is going to be applicable only for California. And now every state is going for that, and across the US, almost like every state, they have this Privacy Act that is there, almost in similar way. Probably they're going to be get over a period of time, we should be seeing something like GDPR, where everything is going to be there for the entire US. Let's see that how it is going to generalize. Now in this one, again, it is going to be applicable for anyone who is going to do business with California residents. So if it is going to be outsourced, when we are going to do from here, so suppose most of the Hollywood films, some of the graphics are done from India. So in that case, they are also going to be adhering. They should be compliant to CCPA. So that's the same logic. If it is going to be GDPR, Europe, out of Europe, so they should be doing that one. Same thing. If it is going to be California, same is going to be applicable. And the rights are going to be there. What rights? All consumers, they have certain rights, and they are going to use those rights. And the penalties are going to be something like, if a business in CA who have 25 million in annual gross revenue, has over 50,000 consumer personal information for commercial purposes, and who earn over 50% of the annual revenue from the sale of consumer personal data. So where it is going to be available? When you are running a small company, this is not going to be eligible at all. So it depends on what is going to be your turnover and what level of data that you have. If you have 50,000 consumer personal information, then it is going to be much more effective. So where it is going to be applicable. So there are certain things that are there which might be changing also over a period of time. Now, what are the benefits that the customers are going to get because of CCPA? First thing is, they are aware of their personal data. They know that they need to know that. They need to know, like, what are the things that the organization is doing with their personal data. And then there should be an option to opt out of their personal data being sold. This is the thing. It is not that that personal data is going to be used within that organization. That information is going to be sold also. Have you noticed this one? Most of the time we see this one. Our personal information is actually being sold, which means they try to get the pattern and then see that that information is going to be sold, so that the people who want to create more leads, they are going to buy that one. Now you can opt out that also. And then the request, the personal information be permanently and completely removed. So for that also you can raise a request, and then you can be treated. CCPA will be applicable if the data moves from, in fact, you cannot move data from Canada to, there to India. That's not allowed. From India to there, if it is meaningful. Why it is? Because, okay, one of the things that we see is, as we said, it is going to be consumer. When we say consumer, California consumer, the people who are going to be citizens of California, and that is going to be applicable even when these people are going to be away from California. That is one of the things. Like even that is the same thing is there for GDPR also. And an European is going to be visiting India, and then still, even though he is going to be out of Europe, but still GDPR is going to be applicable. Whereas the data that we are going to give from India to there, if it is related to any of these consumers, then it is going to be under GDPR. Otherwise, it is not going to be. Okay, so these are the rights that we have. So first thing is you need to be aware of what is being collected, and then before it is getting done, that is the main thing. You should make, that means you should be notified. That is a notification what we talk about. Protection of minors data, that's what is more important. So any person with less than 16 years or under, how are we going to do that one, and who is going, their parent can opt for that. And the third parties will gain access to their personal data or not. So that is also one of the things, because when you are selling it, it is only not selling. You're giving access to their personal data is also one thing, and know how and why data is collected on them. So the reason, what sort of process they want to do, all these things are going to be the benefits that the customers are going to get from that one. So can CPA will be applicable also if the data moves from Nigeria to, same thing, if it is related to the consumer, wherever it is going to be applicable. Actions, what are the actions that we are going to do here, part of this? So first thing is CCPA applies to your business or not. So the way that we have seen, this is how the thing, there is you need to read it more clear. There are more criteria that is given. When you are satisfying this, when you are fulfilling this criteria, then you will become eligible to, that means you are going to, CCPA is going to be applied for your business. First you need to know. Then you're going to have a resident. PA is what type of personal information is collected as part of your organization. First, database has to be created. Same thing, the workflow that we have seen earlier. Document and organize CCPA personal information should be handled. Update the website homepage. Update the private policy. Ensure processes in place and documents and collect PAs being stored. How are you going to store it? And then set up accountability, response, collection process to handle PA requests. Whenever requests are going to come, every request has to be handled depending on the nature of that. So you are going to define the accountability and who is going to respond to that, because there is a time limit, 72 hours you will have to respond back. So if not, at least you will have to tell them that there is a problem, we will be taking more time. So that response has to be managed. Create policies that reconcile with CCPA's requirement to delete data upon request. So this is also one of the requests that is going to come. And the processes that you want to do, right to opt, providing employee-related information, set up incident response plan. This is when the risk has occurred, you are going to see how the impact that you are going to see. Consider the appointing of information of protection officer. So all these things are going to be processes that you are going to define. So now we do not have enough time, because normally when you say GDPR or CCPA, it's a 4-day or 5-day course. For each of that is going to be a big process. Each one, the bullet points that are here, I try to put it as a bullet point, but all these things are going to be extended as a process, and each one will be having its own way. But we need to bring a process so that these things are going to be part of our entire CCPA, and that's how we are going to ensure that the process is there, and these things are going to be available for every activity that we do. Then once the process is established, we are going to implement that. So first thing is you are going to bring the accountability. So establish the accountability and then support. So detailed gap analysis is going to be there, and then you always look for the personal information based on the data flows. You need to see that, because the main thing is, as part of this CCPA, the main thing is personal data. So the personal information, how that personal information flows throughout the data flow. That is, you have a workflow that is happening. So you have the life cycle of the entire process that you have. In the life cycle, data is going to move from one process to other process. So what are the information, privacy information that is going there, that personal information that is moving? You are going to identify them at every level, whether it is relevant or not. You are going to make a decision whether it should be given to this process or not. If it is given, what sort of restriction that you need to do, how we are going to control that it is not going to be misused. That is what we are going to see. Always you see with respect to the process. In this process, what are the personal information that is used? And when we are using it, first thing, whether it is relevant or not. If it is not relevant, remove that. That is what is a minimization. You give only that. For this process, this is the only thing that is required. So you give only that and you can get the things done. Then what sort of controls? If you are supposed to give, what sort of controls we have to monitor preventive measures as well as the corrective measures that you have, and then how are you going to get it back? And to ensure how you're going to do that, if it is going to be outsourced further, those things are going to be part of that. So and everywhere, wherever processes are going to happen, they should be having some system implemented in their organization where data is going to be secured. For data security, normally they will be going for implementing standards like ISO 27001. So they will have to aim, and then the teams are going to be trained and they have to be competent, and monitoring and compliance, monitoring and control should be there at every level, every process. So that's how we are going to implement the process. The first one, we are establishing here various activities. Now we are implementing it. What are the documentation that are required? This is not a complete set. What we see, there may be difference depending on how you want to do that one, depending on the size of the organization, it might vary. But this gives sort of a skeleton thing. What are the things that are going to be there? So the notice and data protection officer job description you need, appointment letter, personal information privacy assessment. So data protection policy has to be there. Internal audit procedure, how are you going to conduct and insert? The process has to be there. The assets for disposal log, when the information assets are no more used, when you have a hard disk, now you are going to dispose that. You cannot just dispose it because anybody can undelete and get the information. So you need to ensure that electronically you are removing the information from there, so that if you are going to dispose that, it is not going to be a threat for the information that it was containing. That's information asset for disposal log. And you need to maintain a log also, and you need to have a disposal policy and procedure. Then information retention policy, how long you will have to retain them. So depending on the type of data, you are going to do that one. Privacy policy, data subject consent form. So the form that is going to be used as part of your application in the portal, where the data subject is going to give their consent. Then parental consent form, if it is going to be a minor, rights and choices of consumer, then information subject concern. So all the things, DSAR, subject access request, data deletion. For every request, it is going to be a different form, because either you can give a same or different thing, so that it is not going to confuse the user. And then when the controller is going to ask the processor to process what type of agreement that you have, that's the template agreement template, because it is going to, every risk that you are going to get, that risks are going to be passed on to the processor also. So you'll have to ensure that if it is going to be outsourced, you'll have to ensure that they will also be liable for those risks what you have, because it's a huge penalty that we have. And the standard contract classes data transfer. When you are doing the data transfer, we are depending on data providers. That is also one of the things. That's why when you have the application running on your cloud, you need to ensure that you have right contracts made with the cloud providers. And when you are using the data transfer using any of the providers, net providers, you'll have to ensure that you have a agreement. Non-disclosure agreement is only for the employees who are going to deal with the information. So the person who is going to pick the call, or the person who is going to who will be responsible for reading this consent form. So based on that, he is going to take a action. So these employees, they will be filling non-disclosure agreement, because they are getting in touch with the information. So as an organization, we'll have to ensure that NDAs will be signed. Non-disclosure agreement is going to be signed with the employees, so that these employees are not going to disclose the information what they come across. Whereas when you talk about supplier data processing agreement, it is much more stringent than that one. There it is not only disclosing, but even processing, processing, unwanted saving, and taking a copy of this, everything is going to be restricted. That is what is a contract, what we talk about. That contract has to be done in different ways. And last one is important, which is going to be applicable more in the COVID situation. Bring your own device policy, because that is a big threat that you have. When the company is not going to provide you laptop, it asks that you need to bring your own laptop and then start working here. Then every information that you are going to get when you start working as a, so it may be a web application. So I'm the person who is going to be responsible for the consent form that have been entered today. So I open that web application and then I have all the information available. Now I can take a screenshot and then show that screenshot in my laptop. That means I have that information. How are you going to protect that? So you need to have a special process defined for bring your own device policy, because that's going to be more riskier because you do not have any control at all. Because everyone, when you have this policy, anybody is going to use their own laptop. So there are going to be thousands of laptops that are going to be there which are not in domain. So you literally you don't have any control on these laptops. In that case, it is going to be a big mess. So only by having a contract with these employees, you should be in a position to do. There, your NDA should also be very stringent. NDA will be applied so that any data miss that is going to happen through this bring your own device policy, it is going to be dealt very severely. Okay, now we see some differences between CCPA and GDPR. Some of the things are very trivial. Some of the things it looks as if it is different, but more or less it is going to be same. Because ideally, if you see, all these four are going to be more or less same. That not much of a difference there. If you look at that, all four are almost everything. In fact, all countries, when 71% are having that one, everywhere these things are almost similar. Because what we want is privacy data. What are the rights? Same thing is going to be applied, only the way that it is, the definitions and those things are going to be a little bit different. Otherwise, it is more or less the same. Now, in this one, when you want to compare jurisdiction, it is going to be applicable for California. This is going to be applicable for European resident. Enforcement, the date in which it started, personal data, definition of that. So it identifies, relate to, describes, capable. So the definition is given here. It is referring the same thing. Breach notification. So obligation to inform database when breach occurs regulated in other California laws. There are other laws, like in India, we have IT law also. So whenever breach is happening, the other California laws also going to be there. In this case, mandatorily that has to be notified. So lawful basis, we did see that in the beginning of the session. What are the activities that are there? And then you have lawful activities. It varies. The way that is mentioned is varies. Actually, it is going to be same. Then privacy notice. So do not sell link on the home page. How we are going to provide here, because CCPA that is giving an option there in the home page itself, so that when the when the data subject is going to be there, you can click on that and go that one. Individual rights, disclosure, access, delete, opt out, and sales information. You will have to respond in 45 days. So here the response is going to be done in a different way. So time limit may change here and there, and then 30 days and 72 days. These are the things that you see here, but more or less it is going to be same. Fines, how it is going to be applied. So that is also going to be having slighter difference from here and there. Data privacy officer, the name itself is going to be there. In this one, no official DPO needs to be appointed, whereas compulsory DPO, as I said, in GDPR, at least you have a part-time DPO should be there. In this case, you may have, you may not have. CCPA terminology, the way the definitions that are there. You have personal information, consumer. In this case, it is consumer. It is case a data subject. In this case, it is business service provider. In this case, it's going to be controller, processor. Okay, let's move to CPPA, Canadian Consumer Privacy Protection Act. This one, it is not a new one. In fact, they had other acts there as part of that. Actually, they had this Digital Chartered Implementation Act, which is a bigger one. It's a big umbrella of acts that are there. And part of that, the Bill C-11, which has two parts there. One is the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, the one what we are talking about now. And then the second one is the Personal Information and Data Protection Tribunal Act. That's the second one. So we are talking about only the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, which is there as part of this, which is part of Bill C-11, which is got introduced. Now this one, this PIPEDA, which is already there. This is there right from 2000. Whereas the CPPA, the one what we are talking about, Privacy Protection Act, which is come into existence only in 2022. So there are certain activities which are already followed here as part of our PIPEDA. And now that is a comparison what you see here. So individuals would receive private right action in CPPA, which they did not have under PIPEDA. That's why it is called consumer privacy protection. In this one, we talk about personal information protection. Information is protected. Any personal information is protected. It is secured. But the problem there is you do not have right. The right thing was not there. So consumers, they are sure that their information is secured, but they do not have that right to exercise. So that right is introduced as part of this Consumer Privacy Protection Act, which is sitting on this one. And then data mobility and portability and identifying the purposes. Whenever we talk about this purpose for data processing, what is the reason? So as a data, as a individual, I should be in a position to know why they are processing that. And in case of a breach, how it is going to be notified. These things are not part of that PIPEDA, which was there earlier. Now, CPPA is one thing which has everything what we have so far. GDPR, similar to GDPR. You are going to have information security, which is going to be the inbuilt feature of that. And apart from that, the individuals will also be having rights. They can exercise their rights. And they will be in a position to ask what is the purpose, why they are doing that one. And then in case of breaches, notification should be available to that one. And they will also be companies, they will have to look for retaining the data and other things. So it is actually expanding the power. That is the main thing here. Under CPPA, the commissioner has expanded the powers of enforcement, which you are forcing it. It is already protected, but the right is given force to the individuals now so that they can exercise their rights. That's a major change what we have seen between PIPEDA and CPPA. But CPPA is consumer privacy protection, whereas this PIPEDA is only personal information protection. So there is a difference here. They protect the information, but they are not given the rights for the individuals to make choices. But now that is what is given as part of the latest one that we have. Now, as part of this, what are the things that can be done? So it is applicable to any business transaction that is going to be there. So purchase or sale, merger, or you are going for a loan, any type of transaction that is going to happen is going to be there. Any commercial activity there also, this CPPA is going to be there. Any activity, transaction that is happening, any commercial transaction that is going to happen, or any business transaction that's happening. In that case, this is going, because here commercial activity is individuals are going to purchase or something. Whereas when you talk about business transaction, it is going to be more of acquisition or merger. Now, in this case, what is the problem for the privacy data? Thing is, I have an organization which is already having some ways of providing right to the individuals. There is another organization which is not there. It is going to get merged. Then you need to ensure that when they are going to be merged, they will be providing rights to everyone. So CPPA is going to be applicable for the entity which got merged also. That is what we are talking about. Business transaction is done at the business level, entity level. Maybe this is possible that today there is a company from Canada. They will be buying a company which is somewhere in Nigeria, somewhere in India, or somewhere. So when they are going to be merged as a single entity, then Consumer Privacy Protection Act, CPPA, is going to be applicable for that new entity which is there after merger. And that is what is given. This is going to be applicable. And commercial activities, any transaction that are going to be done, every transaction is going to be applicable as per CPPA. That's a way that scope is defined here, which is what is there in other areas also. So privacy management program, which means you need to have a program that is there to protect the personal information. And then the request, how are you going to review the request, get the request, and then how are you going to receive the complaints, and how are you going to deal with them. And then the information of training and related thing, development of the material. This is more of a SAR what you have. So you're going to see that what is a subject access request that is taken care as part of our this particular one. So appropriate purposes where it is going to be there. So following factors, the sensitivity of the personal information, that is always going to be looked for. The purpose, again, same thing everywhere. The purpose is the one which is going to distinguish why we are doing the legitimate business. So the purpose represents the legitimate business needs of the organization, effectiveness of the collection, which means the correctness of that, and then whether they are less intrusive means achieving those purposes, comparable cost with comparable benefits. These are the secondary one. Main thing is the sensitivity and the purpose. Sensitivity is confidentiality, what we thought. When you lose that information, that's going to be sensible. sensitive, then purpose. What is the reason for running that particular process? That should be a legitimate requirement. So must obtain the individual valid consent. This is one of the things, and then disclosure of the individual personal information. That is one of the things here. Consent is what is expected from the individual. It's the same thing what we're going to see there in other three also. Timing of consent, when it is going to be there before the time of collection. That's also there. The individual consent must be obtained at or before the time of collection of the thing. So that when it is going to be done. And then it's a huge one, actually. When you look at this, actually, comparing all these four, the documentation that you have for Canada is a huge one. A lot of pages are there. Information for consent to be valid. Which consent is going to be valid? That you are going to analyze that, and then you are going to say whether it is meaningful to apply that or not. So where the third parties are going to be there or not. Then you have a template for that form of consent. We also have that as part of CCPA also. And even GDPR, we have a form of consent. What are the information that you are going to track as part of the consent? Then you have another consent for provision of product or service, consent obtained for deception, withdrawal consent, collection, use, or disclosure to be. These are the formats that are going to be used. And even in GDPR, we'll be having it because I do not want to repeat. That's why I have not added here. In every act, you will be having a specific way what should be collected, what are the attributes that are going to be collected for every consent, that every request that you have. So that should be a specific template and the information that you are supposed to collect. Breach of agreement, whenever the agreement is broken. So how we are going to do that one? When I've set a right that my information should not be revealed, but the organization has done that one. So if it is disclosed, then I'm going to raise that as a breach. Then I'm going to file a case. How it is going to be done. So disclosure is one thing, breach of agreement and contravention. And then powers of here, privacy commissioner under CPPA. This is similar to what we have in other areas. This is a role. Privacy commissioner is going to investigate all the He is going to be the one from the government side. Privacy commissioner. So investigations and initiate inquiries and hearing the appeals which are issued by the commissioner, and penalties are also going to be always done by them. Under the CPPA, the privacy commissioner may summon and enforce appearance of person before commissioner and compel them to give oral written evidence. So this is the power of the government side agency, the representative from the government. Every act, if you see that one, there is going to be one person who will be working on behalf of the government. Normally, it is going to be one person from per country. And he will be the overall, he is a deciding person who will be taking care of that when things are getting escalated. When there is going to be a breach, he is the one who is going to decide what is going to be the action that's going to be taken, what is the fine, all these things. And in case if needed, he will be in a position to conduct an audit at the organization site, and he can also summon people who are going to be part of the processes and the other people part of the organization. And then they can get the information what they want. That's what is that. I do not want to more on that because it is same thing repeated here. When you talk about there's not much of a difference. If you look at this, more or less the thing what we have is similar to what you see at GDPR. And that's the same thing that you have as part of this Canadian thing also. So now we are into PDPB, which is specific to India. So Personal Data Protection Bill, specific to India. So in this bill, 2019, it got passed, and this is to protection of privacy individual. For data security, there is another IT bill is there. So this one is especially for the protection of privacy of the individual, which again is going to refer the IT bill, which is going to take care of information that is there. Now, in fact, this 2019, this particular bill is under revision now. They're going for a different version that is under draft. Government is working on that, so it's going to be much more effective. That's the reason that most of the companies are not going for implementing it. But once we are going to get the latest version, which is under draft now, then it should be stringent than what you see as part of this. In fact, this is also in sync with what we see in GDPR, similar thing. Only thing it is going to talk about, since you look at this, laying social media intermediary, cross-border transfer, accountability of entities, processing personal data, remedies when you go for unauthorized harmful processing. That is how we are going to resolve when the risks are going to be happening, and then Data Protection Authority of India is the board. This is one of the things that is established. Authority of India, this is going to be the person, or this organization will be responsible for taking decisions on what to be done. More of a thing that we have. So obligations as part of this one, what are the things that should be done? So prohibition of processing. First thing is you are prohibited. We cannot. None of the countries can process personal data. By default, it is prohibited. And then when you are doing that, it is going to be on a limited purpose processing of personal data. And then limitation on collection. When you are collecting the personal data, also that is a limitation. You should collect only what you are looking for. And then you need to require the notice for collecting and processing personal data. So all these things are going to be part of the obligation that any organization should oblige. Because first thing is by default, that is the thing, by default, designed by default, that's what we see here. By default, as a process, we should not process personal data. That is purely prohibited, except for specific case with a clear approval, you can do that one. Even if it is going to be done, you will have to limit the purpose of processing. So what is the purpose that should be limited? And then the scope of the data should also be limited. So you see that there are 3 levels that it is limiting it, so that the risk is going to be very minimal as possible. And then it has to be noticed. Notice should be sent so that people will be aware that these are the things that are going to be done. And quality, how long? So we do not want to keep it for a longer time, because the more you keep, the more risks are going to be. It has to be, unless it is going to be warranted, you are not going to retain it. And then for every activity, accountability should be there. In that way, the way that is described is going to be different from GDPR. GDPR is also looking for the same thing, but here in the act itself, it is giving the default. The first itself, read this one. When you read this one, by default, it is prohibited, except for specific and clear things. So it comes as a later one. In that way, it is done. And ground for processing without consent. So when we can do that one? So without consent, if you, for such cases, you don't need a consent from the individual. What is the ground for that? It's only done from the government side. So it is going to be when there is going to be unlawful activity, including fraud. In that case, if they want to seize account information of the individual, they can do that one. Whistleblowing related one, mergers or acquisition, then related that, network of information. So there are certain cases, credit scoring, that is always using our information. Recovery of debts, in case we have not given back the loan, in that case they want to recover it, then they can have access to all our information, and based on that they can recover it. Processing of publicly available personal data. So all these things are going to be done by government organization. That is a special requirement that is there. That's why it says these are the grounds by processing without consent. Okay. Rights of data principle, you are having almost similar there. Confirmation and access, correction and erasure, right to data portability, right to be forgotten, general conditions of exercise rights. So it's almost same. Entire thing is there here also in PDPR. And then adjudicating officer, this is one of the roles that we have, is a person who will be doing this while making an order, the sensitivity of the personal data, scale of these are the activities that he is supposed to do, shall have the right to restrict or prevent the activities of the personal data. So what are the things that he has to do in case if the adjudicating officer is done, if you are not satisfied with that, then you can appeal to Appellate Tribunal also. We are going to see that later. So if you are not happy with the adjudicating as an individual, if you are not happy with how the way he is going to do, then we can appeal to the Appellate Tribunal also later. That is how the process is given. This is how you are going to escalate. Then transparency and accountability. So privacy by design policy, this is also going to be applicable. So anything that is going to be there, the process, the way that it is going to be defined in an organization by default or by design itself, privacy has to be part of it. You cannot say that it is not given there. Transparency, whatever we do, we need to notify the person so that what we are going to do with that and why do we need that? Why do we do that? Security safeguard, that is information, how it is going to be protected. Reporting personal data breach, when breach is happening, when the incidents are going to happen, then whoever is there going to be affected because of that individuals, we are going to call them and then inform them that the data breach has happened. And then classification of the fiduciary. So significant data. So data protection impact analysis, similar to the risk management what we have, maintenance of records, audit of policy. Audit is also going to be part of it. So accountability measures, this is what we have. How we are going to ensure that the information, that the process that we have defined here, this process, especially this process, especially this one, how that process is going to be measured, how it is going to be controlled. That's what is given here, the way that you are going to control and what are the controls measures that we have. So you need to have a process for this. Is what is there for everything. That's going to be a process. When you say privacy by design, so the policies, when they are going to be defined, we need to ensure by design itself, it should take care of privacy everywhere. When you say that we are going to do with this one, then you need to consider what are the information that are going to be private information, personal information, and ensure that these things are not going to be taken just like that. You are going to get the consent and then do. Only if it is consent is given, you will be including them. So the process itself is going to have that. By design, it should be part of that. Then it is going to be transparent. Everything is going to be there the way that we are going to say. The way, only thing is major difference what we see here is this. By default, it is prohibited. In all the other cases, by default, it should be least possible thing. It should not create problem to that. In this case, by default, it is prohibited. That's a thing that we have. And then now we have a data protection officer. He's going to be responsible for organization. So providing information and advice, monitoring, providing advice to development of internal, more of a person where we can, same thing that we have in GDPR. So he can be a person who can be used as a SME in that area. So, and he's also going to be point of contact for the data principal. So anything that we want, he's the person who is going to be doing that one. This role is maybe a shared role also. Multiple company can have a same data protection officer, can be multiple companies also. Restriction of transfer of data outside India, the same thing, because everywhere that is the thing. When you want to have a personal data, then you need to ensure that Indian, who is going to be a Indian by nature citizen of India, the personal data should not be moved out. That is prohibited. Again, the word is used here. Prohibition of processing of sensitive data. By default, it is prohibited. If you want to do, then you will have to get approval. That is the thing. That's how it is given. And if you look at this one, the personal data means such personal data may be notified by the central government to be critical personal data. So critical personal data shall be only be processed in India. And that is, if you want to send it out, then it has to be notified by the personal one. Conditions for transfer of sensitive personal data, the one, only when explicit consent is given by data principal for such transfer and where the transfer is made pursuant to the contract. Again, whatever activities that are there, it is always going to be governed by the central government. So everything is centralized here. It is not that every state can take a, so central government is going to be doing that one, and there is going to be a department for that. That's what we are going to see in the next slide. So this is the one, Data Protection Authority of India, which is the organization that's going to take care of the entire thing. Now, all the other thing, if you see, it is a role, and then there is a office to support the role. In this case, it is going to be the office, and then it is going to be supported by people. So Data Protection Authority of India is the one which is going to be there, and it will be taking care of everything. Authority, this authority, if required, it's also clear that head office is always going to be at the capital, and if needed, you can have offices at other areas also within India. And then the chairperson, what is there? It is clear it is a huge thing. I have not added here the way that you are going to form, where the Data Protection Authority of India is going to be formed. It's a six whole-time members. Out of that, one chairperson will be there, and this chairperson, how we are going to select, and what are the conditions for him to be selected for this one. Those things are also going to be there as part of this. So duties of DPA, similar to other things that we have, functions, is the one who will be making a decision at the country level. So whatever is there, when there are going to be fines, or when there are going to be incidents that are going to happen, he is the person who will be making a final decision on that one. So at that level only we are talking about here. And then the penalties, the main thing, they will be dealing with the penalty, and then how it is going to be considered. It's also having the same thing. have some restriction like this. It is going to be based on some amount here and 4% of that, and then total worldwide turnover of the preceding financial year, whichever is higher. The same way in how it is considered in most of the other acts that is there. Here also it is going to be there. There are two things here when data convenes any of the following provisions. Obligation to take prompt and appropriate action to get this thing. Failure of that is going to be thing. And here also it is going to be 2%. Here it is going to be 4%, depending on what non-conformities or what type of complaints that are going to be there. Okay, the tribunal. Tribunal is going to be this given by the central government, established this tribunal. So that is going to hear and dispose any appeal from the order of adjudication. This is what we have seen. At the lower level, we have this adjudicating officer. From this, if people are not satisfied, what of data protection authority. Nigeria, I have not seen that much, but there should be at the government level, there should be some board. Either it should be a role for Nigeria. I have not gone through that Privacy Act, but everywhere the idea is either you have a role and there is going to be a department or function to support that role. In India, the way that is given is you have the function and there is going to be number of roles that will be doing the activities under that particular function. So definitely it will be there, and it is always going to be governed by the government, direct government. That is how it is going to be there. The structure is almost same everywhere, because that is how it has to be, because at least at the country level, you need to have some sort of control, and that is to be done by one person. And he or she, that particular role should be deciding on how you are going to give your penalties and what sort of liabilities that are there for those whenever things are going to be failed. So the duties that are given here, what are the things that he is supposed to do? So shall be duty of the authority to protect interests of the data principles. Primarily, that is the thing. You'll have to protect the data. Data principle is the terminology that is used as a here data subject. In this one, data principles is the subject, is the thing that is used. Maintaining a database on website containing the names of significant data fiduciaries. Examination of any data audits. They can run the audit if they want and then take action based on that. Certificate of registration data to data auditors and renewal. This is one thing which is not there by default as part of GDPR. Here, it is the duty of the DPA to provide certificates based on the audit. They can conduct audits on their behalf. There can be third party who can conduct audit, and they can provide certificates, so that that certificate is going to give organization that they have this implemented as part of that. The DPA, this is implemented as part of this, and then data auditors are going to be there, and then wherever there is a personal data, if it is going to be transferred outside India, approval is going to be given by DPA. Penalties, we did see that earlier also. Penalties are how it is going to be given. We have seen this. Appeals to how it is going to be appealed. And when you have something, this is what we have seen. When there is a problem with the person, if they are not responding, in that case, you have this tribunal available. So this is going to be issued in various places in central government and other areas, so that this is going to be getting these appeals from various areas. Any person aggrieved by the decision of the authority may prefer. So you can go to the tribunal within a period of 30 days, and then it's going to be discussed as part of the tribunal. So next level where you are going to make a decision there based on how it is going to be appealed. So next level of appeal is also given here. Offences, what sort of offences are going to be there? Here in this case, it is clearly mentioned, knowingly or intentionally. So this is the thing. If it is by mistake, then there is a cause. You will not be considered that as an offense. That is an incident. Whereas if it is going to be done knowingly or intentionally, that is why whenever we are having a breach identified, the first thing that we are going to do, that is we are going to analyze and then see whether it is an incident or it is an activity that is done knowingly or intentionally. If it is going to be done knowingly or intentionally, then it is going to be considered as offense. Then it is going to have higher fines. So fines are given here for the individuals and other things, why they have done that one. There are different classes there. In fact, there are 2 more are available here as part of these offenses. And then how it is going to be there. So Not much of a difference. Actually, even if I say that GDPR, CCPA also, I just mentioned that as a table, but not much of difference as such. As I said, even if you want to say something as a different, it is going to be the names, the terminologies. In one say you say data subject, here we say data principal, in somewhere you say consumer. So it is only the definitions that are going to be different, but the intrinsic design of that is always going to be same. You are talking about privacy. First, you are going to identify what is to be considered as personal information, and then you'll have to ensure that you have a data security policy as part of your organization. And third one, you're also going to give for individuals rights, and the rights are going to be almost same: rights to view, rights to change, rights to delete, rights to question, rights to notice. These are the things that are going to be there everywhere. It is going to be there. Then when you are going to have escalation, how it is going to be escalated at various levels, then there is a role from the government side, which will be overseeing all these activities that are happening. And when some breach is happening, how are you going to do that one? And audit in every act, that's also going to be same. Audit has to be done as a preventive measure. And when you see an incident breach that has happened, then it has to be done again to see what is the root cause of that. Then that has to be presented to back to the government head, whoever it is, depending on the act. You are going to send that, and he is going to take a decision on what is going to be the penalty. And when breach is happening, all the individuals are going to be notified about the breach, and you will also be notifying government on the breach. And at the end, you are going to adhere to what the government is going to tell you, the penalty, and then you are going to pay to the individuals. This concept, what I'm talking is there in all four. I hope that it is going to be there in every country. It is going to be same, because this is how the things are going to be logically fit in. But only thing difference is who will be playing the roles and what is the name of the role. That's what is going to be a little bit different. When you talk about opportunities, a lot of things are there, because as I said, one of the slides I've given, what are the trends that are happening? So everywhere, every country is going for this, which means you are going to comply to multiple standards. When that is the situation, then there are going to be need for more compliance managers and compliance executives and other things. Normally, what we have is data privacy assessor, the auditor, data privacy analyst, data privacy operation manager, every level. I don't have to name it, because you are going to start from the lower level, and then it goes up to VP, director. Every level you are going to see that one. There are opportunities, a lot of opportunities are there in this way provided. And that too, if you are familiar with, you are going to have ways by which you will be also be, when the business is going to happen between multiple countries, then accordingly it's going to have multifold, and that is also going to have an option. The acts that you are familiar with, the more you are going to be saleable. So that way it is going to be, opportunities are plenty, because it is more or less same everywhere. Only thing, you need to know the context where it is going to be applied, and the terminologies that are used in every act, and then the roles that are going to be in different name. You are going to base that, and then based on that you are going to do audit or something. So it depends on how we are going to what do you call, equip ourselves to meet this. A lot of opportunities are there. In fact, anything that we save the data, even when you talk about data privacy comes later. When you talk about data analysts and data engineers, that is going to be a big demand, because every activity that is there is going to be based on data. Any sales activity and marketing activity is all going to be done based on the data now, because a lot of data is now available. Most of the things are available online. So internal and external data, huge volume of data is available. So data engineers are going to be there. And when we say the data engineers are going to be more, that means data is going to be more. When more data is going to be there, then there are going to be more problems with relate to data privacy also. That means you will be having all these opportunities also increasing over a period of time. At least for the next 5 years, there are going to be a lot of opportunities that are going to happen, especially in India. When we go for this new thing, when it is going to come, then definitely, and it is a certifiable one. That is how it is defined. So when it is going to be a certifiable one, then it is going to have a full suite, something like any of the ISO standard that we have. So you'll have a lot of opportunities here. This is going to be audited. In such case, you have a lot of options that are going to be available. And even for internal auditing, sometimes we will be employing consultants, because they will be looking it in a different perspective, and you are going to identify more and more gaps in it. The very benefit of going for audit, conducting audit, is to unearth, is to identify more and more gaps that we have in our process. Yeah, that is the thing that I can talk about. Okay, any certificate specific training needed for these roles? If yes, what certification to start with? Yes. Now, why certificates are not there? When you say assessor, people are giving certificate because there are trainings conducted for GDPR assessment also. They called us assessors, GDPR assessors, and that is what is there in other areas also. They are also giving some certificate, but that certificate is given by, that's more of a course completion certificate. Unless in ISO, they cannot give a certificate which is going to be considered everywhere globally, because the institutes which are going to conduct, they are going to give certificate which are just a completion certificate. But if GDPR or any of these things are going to come, like how the ISO works, where ISO, they have the standard, they also do certification, and they also conduct trainings. In such case, this scenario will work. Rohit, do I answer your question? As of now, yes, it is available, but certification is going to be for every role. All these three roles you have. You have fundamental foundation, and then you have implementation and assessor. Okay, CDPSC is a common one. It's a common one. It is going to be applicable for any IT, right? So it can be applied anywhere. But if we want to have a specific one, like you have a lead auditor 27001, that is specific to information ISMS for 27001. Whereas ISA cross CDPSC is going to be very generic one, which can be considered for any type of audit that you are going to consider with respect to IT. Yes, whatever we say, yes, there are multiple organizations, they have this one. So depending on that, we need to get that one. But as of now, I don't say that it is going to be. So I need to do ISO with CDPSC. No, I don't say that one. I just compare the way that ISO works. ISO, whenever it's going to get some standard, along with that, it gives a certification for the organization where it is going to be implemented. Along with that, it is also giving training programs. All three are bundled together, and it is going to be managed by ISO organization. Whereas GDPR does not do anything like that. Because from the European Union, it just gives the act, and we will have to implement it. There are third-party assessors who are there. They assess the system and tell us whether we are in sync with that or not. That's it. So that is what, if all this GDPR also going to convert into that one in that fashion, like India is actually planning for that. They want to have sort of a auditors part of it, and it is the responsibility of that board who is going to do that one. Then in that case, it will be acting as ISO itself.